The blind Duke fell in love with his quiet nurse. When he regained his sight, he gasped, "You, the wife I banished?" Alistair's world was darkness, and his anger towards his wife, Evelyn, was the only thing he could see. But when his sight was restored, he saw more than just her face. He saw the damage he'd caused. "You, the woman I ruined? How could you still love me?" "Hello, lovely. If you're enjoying this romantic tale, I'd be so grateful for a like or a subscribe. It helps me bring you more stories of love, longing, and history. And if you're up for it, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every note, and it always brings a smile to my face. Chapter 1. The Fall of a Duke. The crystal decanter was cool beneath Alistair's fingertips. He traced its cut glass pattern, a pattern he could no longer see but knew as intimately as the lines of his own palm. 1, 2, 3 glugs of brandy into the tumbler. He'd learned to count the sound, the weight of liquid filling glass. 4 glugs meant overflow, meant sticky amber pooling on mahogany, meant another mess for the servants to clean while they whispered their pity. 3 was sufficient for a man drinking away his memories. Duke Alistair Thornton sat alone in his study, surrounded by shadows he would never escape. Not the shadows of evening creeping across Thornton estate, those he might have welcomed. No, these were the permanent shadows of his blindness, the unrelenting darkness that had become his entire world 3 years ago. He raised the glass to his lips, tasted the burn, and wished it could scorch away the images burned into his mind. Images from before, when he could see, when he was whole, when Evelyn still. He slammed the glass down. On his desk lay letters he could no longer read, their wax seals cold and smooth beneath his exploring fingers. Business correspondence, estate matters, invitations to events he would never attend. He tried, in the early days, to have servants read them aloud, but hearing his diminished life narrated in pitying voices had been unbearable, so the letters piled up, unread. Like everything else in his life accumulating, neglected, slowly drowning him, the weight of helplessness crushed him daily, hourly, with every fumbling reach for objects that eluded his grasp. Every stumble over furniture he'd forgotten was there. Every moment of depending on servants who regarded him with the careful wariness reserved for invalid children and rabid dogs. He was the Duke of Thornton, and he was nothing. 3 years earlier, the storm had come from nowhere, as spring storms often did in 1837. Alistair's carriage raced through the night, rain lashing the windows, thunder cracking like artillery fire overhead. "Faster!" he'd shouted to the driver. He'd been returning from London, eager to reach Evelyn, to surprise her with the emerald necklace tucked in his coat pocket. Their 5th anniversary was approaching, and he'd wanted to see her face light up. The fallen oak appeared in a flash of lightning. The horses screamed, the driver pulled hard on the reins, too hard, and the carriage lurched violently to the left. Alistair felt himself thrown across the cabin. His head struck the doorframe, a sickening crack that seemed to echo inside his skull. Then nothing, then pain, then darkness. When he woke, the darkness remained. He could hear Dr. Samuel Bennett's voice, grave and careful. "Your Grace, I'm afraid the damage to your optic nerves may be permanent." Permanent? The word had seemed impossible. Alistair Thornton, who had commanded rooms with a glance, who had built a fortune through sharp observation and sharper instincts, who had won Evelyn's heart with looks across crowded ballrooms reduced to eternal night. "There must be something," he'd said, his voice hoarse. "I'm sorry, Your Grace. Medical science has its limits." Limits. Another impossible word. Confined to his bed during those first agonizing months of recovery, Alistair had learned that blindness sharpened other senses, particularly hearing, and what he heard destroyed him. Servants whispered, when they thought him asleep, "Her Grace was out again yesterday, the 3rd time this week. Where does she go?" Best not to ask questions above our station. Evelyn's absences. He'd never noticed them before, too busy with estate business and parliamentary duties. But now, trapped in darkness and dependency, he noticed everything. Then came the letter. His valet, sorting through correspondence, had found it in Evelyn's private sitting room. "Your Grace, there's something unusual here. Read it." The valet's hesitation spoke volumes. "It's addressed to Lord Egerton, Your Grace." Egerton, Alistair's business rival, the man who'd tried to undermine every venture Alistair had ever undertaken. The man who'd once, at a ball years ago, remarked that Evelyn was wasted on a bore like Thornton. "Read it," Alistair repeated, his voice deadly quiet. "Our arrangement proceeds as discussed. the valet read. The shipment will arrive Thursday. Our mutual interests align perfectly. Discretion is paramount. Destroy this letter after reading. The words had been a knife to Alistair's chest. Arrangement, mutual interests, discretion. There are others, Your Grace. Several, in fact, all in similar, coded language. Why was his wife corresponding secretly with his enemy? What arrangement required discretion? What mutual interests could they possibly share? The possibilities that bloomed in Alistair's mind were poison. More evidence accumulated like storm clouds. The shipment will arrive Thursday. What shipment? Business secrets? Estate documents? What was she selling? Our mutual interests align. What interests could his wife and his rival share, except the destruction of Alistair himself? Then came the afternoon that shattered what remained of his heart. Alistair had insisted on leaving his chambers, on attempting some semblance of normalcy. A servant guided him slowly down the hall toward the drawing room. He'd wanted to sit by the fire, to feel its warmth on his face, to pretend for a moment that he was still master of his own home. He heard voices as they approached, Evelyn's voice, bright with animation, and then unmistakably Lord Egerton's deep laugh. Alistair froze, his hand gripping the servant's arm. Evelyn was speaking. If Alistair knew what we've been doing, he'd never forgive me. Egerton's reply was smooth, almost amused. Then we must ensure he never finds out. Their laughter mingled. The servant felt Alistair sway, steadied him. Your Grace? Shall I? Take me back to my chambers. But, sir, now. The walk back was endless. Each step was agony. Each breath was broken glass in his lungs. If Alistair knew what we've been doing, he'd never forgive me. It was a confession, clear as day, damning as sin. His wife was having an affair with Lord Egerton, selling his secrets, laughing about her deception while he lay helpless and blind. That evening, Alistair summoned her. She came with her usual gentle grace, the rustle of her skirts, the faint scent of lavender. Alistair, you asked for me. How long has it been going on? His voice was ice over steel. A pause. How long has what? Don't lie to me. His hand swept across the desk in fury, sending papers, the decanter, the glass flying. Crystal shattered. Evelyn gasped. I heard you, he said, each word a blade. With Egerton. If Alistair knew what we've been doing. Alistair, please, if you'd just let me tell you. Tell me what? He was shouting now, all control gone. That you've been faithful? That you haven't been selling my secrets to that vulture? That you haven't been sleeping with him while I lay here, blind and broken? I would never, Alistair. I love you. Love? He laughed, a terrible sound. You loved my title, my wealth, and now that I'm useless to you, you've found a replacement. That's not true. She was crying now. He could hear it in her voice. If you would just listen. I've heard enough. I've heard everything I need to hear. His voice dropped to deadly calm. You will leave this house. Tonight. Alistair, please. She reached for him. Her hand touched his arm. He jerked away as if burned. Don't. I can't bear for you to touch me now. You may take your personal belongings. Everything else remains here. It was never truly yours anyway, but this is my home. Your home is wherever Egerton keeps his mistresses. Now, get out. She was sobbing openly now. I'll go. But Alistair, one day you'll learn the truth, and I hope you can forgive yourself. I'll never forgive myself for marrying you. The words hung in the air between them, irreversible as death. He heard her pack, the opening and closing of drawers, the sound of a single trunk being dragged across the floor. She walked down the grand staircase. He stood at the top, his blind eyes facing the direction of her retreat, though he could not see her. She paused. He knew she'd paused because her footsteps stopped. Don't bother saying goodbye, he called down. Just go. She opened her mouth to speak. He heard her draw breath, but what emerged wasn't words. It was a sound he would hear in his nightmares for 3 years afterward. A choked, terrible sound. Half sob, half laugh, as if the absurdity of it all, the cruelty, the injustice, had broken something fundamental in her. Then her voice, strained but steady. Goodbye, Alistair. Her footsteps echoed down the marble hall. The front door opened, closed. She was gone. And Alistair stood alone at the top of the stairs, victorious in his righteousness, vindicated in his anger, absolutely certain he'd done the right thing. 3 years later, Alistair sat in that same study, alone. 3 years of isolation, 3 years of bitterness and regret that he refused to acknowledge as regret. 3 years of servants who feared him, former friends who'd stopped visiting, a great house that had become a tomb, the great Duke of Thornton, reduced to a bitter shell. He reached into his desk drawer, pulled out the miniature portrait he kept there. His fingers traced the frame he'd memorized every detail before his sight left him. Evelyn's face, painted 3 years before the accident, before everything shattered. He didn't know why he kept it. Spite, perhaps. A reminder of what she'd taken from him, what she'd destroyed. "You destroyed everything," he whispered to the portrait, his thumb moving over where her painted smile would be. "And I still can't stop thinking about you." The admission cost him, but in the darkness, alone, he could afford such honesty. A knock at the door made him flinch. He shoved the portrait back into the drawer. "What is it?" His butler's cautious voice. "Your Grace, Dr. Bennett is here to see you. Tell him to go away." "He says it's urgent, sir. About your condition." A pause. "He's brought a specialist." Alistair went very still. A specialist. After 3 years of doctors telling him nothing could be done, Samuel Bennett had brought a specialist. He wanted to hope. He couldn't afford to hope. "Send him in," Alistair said finally, his voice rough. The door opened. Footsteps approached Bennett's familiar gate, and another, lighter step. "Alistair," Bennett's warm voice filled the room. "Thank you for seeing me. Did I have a choice?" "You always have a choice. That's what I'm here to discuss." A pause. "I've brought someone who might be able to help you. Someone with particular skills in caring for patients with your condition. I don't need a nursemaid, Samuel. You need someone who won't flinch at your moods. Someone patient. Someone who understands loss." Alistair heard the other person shift slightly. Silent. Observing. "And what makes you think I'll agree to this?" "Because, old friend," Bennett said gently, "I think you're tired of living in the dark. In more ways than one." Alistair's jaw clenched. Damn Samuel for knowing him too well. "Fine," he said curtly, "but I have rules." He didn't know it yet, but the woman standing silently in his study the specialist Bennett had brought would change everything. If only he'd known who she really was. If only he'd known she was the woman he'd cast out 3 years ago, returned in disguise. If only he'd known that his wife, Evelyn, had never stopped loving him. But Alistair Thornton was blind in more ways than one, and some truths take more than sight to see. Chapter 2. The quiet nurse arrives. Dr. Samuel Bennett had aged well. Alistair could hear it in his voice, still strong, still certain, the voice of a man who delivered half the county's children and closed the eyes of their grandparents. A voice that had told Alistair 3 years ago that his darkness would be permanent. "Alistair, you can't go on like this." Bennett's footsteps moved closer, leather shoes on Persian carpet. "You barely eat. You refuse to leave your rooms. What's the point?" Alistair's fingers found the brandy glass again, though it was empty. "I can't read, can't ride, can't manage my own estate, which is precisely why I've brought someone who can help. A nurse, highly skilled, discreet. I don't need a nursemaid, Samuel." The glass hit the desk harder than Alistair intended. "You need someone who won't flinch at your moods." Bennett's voice held that particular firmness that had made him an excellent physician and an infuriating friend. Someone patient, someone who understands loss. Before Alistair could respond, there was a soft knock at the door. The rustle of skirts. Light footsteps crossing the threshold, lighter than the servant's heavy tread. Purposeful but quiet. Alistair's other senses, sharpened by 3 years of darkness, catalogued details automatically. The faint scent of lavender drifted across the study, steady breathing, controlled and calm. "Your Grace," Bennett said with obvious satisfaction, "may I present Nurse Eleanor Ashford?" A whisper, barely audible. "Your Grace," Alistair frowned. "Why does she whisper?" "Eleanor suffered a severe throat injury several years ago," Bennett replied smoothly. "Damaged her vocal cords. She can speak, but only in whispers. I hope that won't be a problem." Alistair waved dismissively. "As long as she's competent." What he couldn't see was the woman standing 3 feet away. Her hands clasped so tightly, her knuckles had gone white. Evelyn Thornton stood in her husband's study and felt the world tilt beneath her feet. 3 years. 3 years of grief, of rebuilding myself from nothing. And here I am, back in this house. She'd told herself she wouldn't come. When Dr. Bennett had found her at St. Mary's Hospital in London, had explained his plan, she'd refused. Absolutely not. Never again. But Bennett had been persuasive. "Give yourself closure, Your Grace. A chance to say goodbye properly, to end this chapter of your life with dignity, instead of that terrible night." Closure. The word had been tempting, so she'd agreed. 1 month of caring for a blind patient, 1 month to prove to herself that she'd moved beyond the pain. Then she'd leave, and this time she wouldn't look back. Except standing here, seeing how thin Alistair had become, how the proud set of his shoulders had collapsed into something brittle and defensive. "I don't know if I can do this." Dr. Bennett's eyes met hers across the room. He knew, of course. He'd always known. He'd been their physician since their wedding day, had delivered the news of Alistair's blindness, had watched their marriage shatter, and now he'd orchestrated this reunion, suspecting that perhaps the truth might heal them both, or destroy them completely. "Eleanor will handle your daily care," Bennett was saying. "Meals, medications, physical therapy for your mobility. I can manage myself," Alistair said irritably. "You knocked over 3 cups of tea this week. You refused to use your cane. You nearly fell down the stairs." Alistair's jaw clenched. Evelyn recognized the expression pride and shame warring for dominance. She whispered, keeping her voice soft and unfamiliar. "I'm here to help, Your Grace, not to pity." Something in her tone made him pause. His head tilted slightly, as if trying to place the sound. "Fine," he said curtly, "but I have rules. No unnecessary conversation, no attempts to cheer me up. Just do your job." "Understood, Your Grace." The dismissal in his voice was a knife between her ribs. But what had she expected? Warmth? Recognition? He'd made his feelings abundantly clear 3 years ago. That evening, a housemaid showed Evelyn to her quarters in the servants' wing. The cruel irony wasn't lost on her. She'd once slept in the Duchess's chambers on the 2nd floor, the rose-papered room with windows overlooking the gardens, the 4-poster bed where she and Alistair had. She stopped that thought before it could fully form. Now she unpacked her modest belongings in a small room with whitewashed walls and a narrow bed. A servant's room, which, she supposed, was exactly what she was now. She walked to the window, looked out at the grounds she'd once tended with such care. The rose garden was visible from here, her roses, planted in the 2nd year of their marriage. Red roses, because Alistair had once said they reminded him of her. Passionate, alive, beautiful. They were overgrown now, choked with weeds, blooms sparse and struggling. He let everything go, she thought, including himself. She removed her nurse's cap, unpinned her hair, let it fall down her back. In the small mirror above the washstand, she barely recognized herself. Thinner, yes. Older grief had carved lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago. Worn. 1 month, she told her reflection firmly. "I'll care for him for 1 month, then I'll leave, and this time, I won't look back." The woman in the mirror didn't look convinced. The first morning, Evelyn entered Alistair's chambers with his breakfast tray. He was already awake, sitting in the chair by the window. He couldn't see the sunrise painting the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold, but he faced it anyway, as if by habit or hope. "Your breakfast, Your Grace." She set the tray on the table beside him, began arranging the items. Toast, eggs, tea. Her hands moved automatically, and before she could think better of it, she reached for his hand and placed it on the teacup handle. The exact way she used to, years ago. The exact placement, the exact gentle pressure of her fingers guiding his. Alistair froze. "How did you—" He stopped himself. "Never mind." But she saw his brow furrow, saw him process the familiarity of that gesture. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Careful," she warned herself. "So careful. Will there be anything else, Your Grace?" "No, that will be all." But his hand remained on the teacup, his head tilted slightly, as if something nagged at him, something he couldn't quite place. Over the following days, a pattern emerged. Mornings, she helped him dress. He was too proud to admit he needed help with buttons, with cufflinks, with the intricacies of a gentleman's wardrobe. She worked in silence, her whispers minimal, her touch efficient. Midday, she read the estate ledgers to him. She couldn't help but notice the mismanagement tenants whose complaints had gone unaddressed, investments poorly handled, opportunities missed. The estate that had thrived under their joint management was slowly crumbling. "I could fix this," she thought, biting back suggestions. I could, but she wasn't the Duchess anymore. She was the nurse, and nurses didn't offer business advice. Afternoons, they walked in the garden. She described what he couldn't see, the way light filtered through the oak leaves, the goldfinches nesting in the hedge, the first brave crocuses pushing through the soil. Evenings, she played piano in the music room while he sat in his chair, listening. Mozart, mostly, his favorite. It was easier than she'd expected and harder than she'd imagined. Easier because the routine created distance, a professional boundary she could hide behind. Harder because every moment in this house was a memory, every room a ghost of their former happiness. 1 week in, during their afternoon walk, Alistair stumbled on a tree root. Evelyn caught his arm, steadied him. For a moment, just a moment, he leaned into her support, his weight against her shoulder. Then he pulled away, jaw tight with embarrassment. "The roses," he said quietly, changing the subject. "Do they still bloom?" Evelyn looked at the overgrown bushes, at the few struggling flowers among the weeds. They need tending, Your Grace. But yes, a few blooms remain. My wife planted those." His voice was distant, carefully neutral. "Before, he didn't finish. Didn't need to." Evelyn's heart cracked down the middle. She whispered, "They're beautiful, red as rubies." She loved red roses. The ghost of something, grief, longing, crossed his face. Said they reminded her of passion, of life. A long silence stretched between them. A robin sang somewhere in the branches above. "I killed that in her," Alistair said finally. "The passion, the life." Evelyn's throat tightened. She forced herself to whisper. Perhaps she killed it herself, by leaving. His hand tightened on his cane, knuckles white. "She didn't leave. I threw her out, and she was glad to go." The certainty in his voice was worse than anger. He truly believed it. Truly believed she'd been happy to abandon him. Evelyn opened her mouth to protest, to explain, too, but what could Nurse Eleanor say that wouldn't give her away? So she said nothing, and the silence between them felt like a tomb. That night, she brought his evening medications, the tonic Dr. Bennett had prescribed for the headaches that still plagued him. As she handed him the glass of water, her fingers brushed his. He paused, the glass halfway to his lips. "Eleanor? Yes, Your Grace? Thank you for not treating me like a helpless child." Her whisper cracked slightly despite her best efforts. "You're not helpless, Your Grace. Just lost." He didn't respond. She left quietly, closing the door behind her with a soft click. In his darkened chamber, Alistair sat alone with his thoughts. The nurse's touch lingered on his skin, gentle, certain, somehow achingly familiar. Her whispered words echoed in his mind. Just lost. For the first time in 3 years, he felt something other than the constant grinding anger that had become his only companion. He felt something dangerous. He felt hope. And in her small room in the servants' wing, Evelyn pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window and whispered into the darkness, 1 month. Just 1 month. I can survive 1 month. But already, she knew it was a lie. Chapter 3. Shadows of the Past. 2 weeks into Eleanor's tenure at Thornton Estate, and Alistair found himself doing something he hadn't done in 3 years. He was listening for footsteps. Not just any footsteps, hers. Light and purposeful, with a particular rhythm he'd come to recognize. Every morning, he'd sit in his chamber and wait for that sound in the hallway, the soft knock that preceded her entrance, the whispered greeting that had somehow become the best part of his day. The routine had become pleasant. He hadn't realized it yet, but the servants had. They whispered among themselves that His Grace smiled more, that his shoulders didn't carry quite the same rigid tension, that sometimes, during the afternoon garden walks, they could hear something that sounded almost like conversation, almost like life returning to the tomb. "You're very good at this," Alistair said, as Eleanor guided his hand to the razor. They were in his dressing room, morning light streaming through windows he couldn't see. She'd positioned the basin, stropped the blade, and now steadied his hand with her own as she taught him to shave himself again, a small dignity he'd abandoned months ago. "I've had practice, Your Grace, with other patients." A pause, long enough that he noticed. "With someone I cared for, long ago." Her whisper carried a weight that made him curious. "What happened to them?" "I lost them." The words were barely audible. Through my own fault. The sadness in her voice resonated with something deep in his chest. He knew that particular quality of grief, the kind that came not from fate or accident, but from one's own choices. "Then we are alike, Eleanor," he said quietly, "both haunted by our failures." She didn't respond, but he felt her hand tremble slightly against his before she steadied it, guided the razor along his jaw with practiced care. He wondered, not for the first time, who she had been before she became Nurse Eleanor Ashford. What failures haunted her? What losses shaped the gentle competence of her touch? Their afternoon walks had become Alistair's favorite part of the day. Eleanor described everything in vivid detail, painting the world he could no longer see with her whispered words. "The oak tree's leaves are turning gold, Your Grace," she murmured as they walked the familiar paths, "like coins catching sunlight, each one spinning as it falls. There's a robin's nest in the hedge, 3 blue eggs, perfectly round. The mother watches us from a branch above. The fountain in the west garden, someone's cleaned it. The water sparkles." She didn't tell him that she was the someone who'd cleaned it. that she'd spent her free hours on her knees with a scrub brush, unable to bear seeing the fountain where she and Alistair had once sat together, now choked with leaves and algae. That restoring small pieces of the estate felt like restoring small pieces of herself. Alistair drank in her descriptions like a man dying of thirst. "You have a poet's eye, Eleanor. I simply see what's there, Your Grace." "No, you see beauty. That's different." He paused. "My wife used to do that. See beauty in ordinary things." The mention of Evelyn always brought a change in his voice, something harder, more brittle. Eleanor had learned to recognize it, to brace herself. "She sounds like she had a gift," Eleanor whispered. "She had many gifts, all of them wasted on deception." The ledgers proved to be Eleanor's undoing. She'd been reading estate correspondence to Alistair for over a week, biting her tongue as she noted mismanagement after mismanagement. But when she came across a tenant's request for roof repairs, the third such request, dated 8 months prior, with no response, she couldn't stay silent. "This tenant's request for roof repairs, it's been pending for 8 months. My steward handles such matters," Alistair said defensively. Eleanor's whisper turned sharp. "Your steward has been embezzling, Your Grace. These numbers don't add up." Alistair went very still. "How do you know accounting?" She'd made a mistake, revealed too much. I had education before I became a nurse." He leaned forward in his chair. "Show me. Explain the discrepancies." So she did, her finger guiding his over the pages, pointing out where expenses had been inflated, where profits had been redirected, where the careful system she and Alistair had built together had been systematically dismantled for someone else's gain. "You're wasted as a nurse, Eleanor," he said when she'd finished. "You should be managing an estate." The irony nearly broke her. "I did manage this estate," she wanted to scream. "I stood beside you and built all of this, and you threw me away. Instead," she whispered, "I'm content with my current position, Your Grace." But her hands shook as she gathered the ledgers. That evening, as she tended to a cut on his hand, he'd struck his desk in frustration earlier, splitting the skin across his knuckles. Alistair had been unusually quiet, brooding. She could feel the tension radiating from him as she cleaned the wound, applied salve, prepared bandages. Then, suddenly, "Do you know why I'm like this, Eleanor? Why I'm so bitter?" "The blindness, Your Grace. The blindness is nothing compared to the betrayal." He was quiet for a moment. Eleanor's heart began to race. She knew what was coming, could feel it building like a storm. "I was married once. Did you know?" Her hands stilled on the bandage. I'd heard rumors." "Rumors don't do it justice." His voice hardened, turned to iron. "Her name was Evelyn. Beautiful, charming, and a liar." "Please," Evelyn thought desperately. "Please don't. She married me for my title. I see that now." The words came faster, as if a dam had broken. "When I was whole, powerful, she played the devoted wife. But when I lost my sight, became a burden. She showed her true nature." Eleanor's hands trembled as she wrapped the bandage. "What did she do?" "She took a lover, my rival, Lord Egerton, sold my business secrets to him." Each word was a lash. I heard them together, laughing about their deception. His voice dropped. "But you know what haunts me most, Eleanor?" She could barely breathe. "What? Your Grace?" "The day she left, I demanded she defend herself, justify her betrayal. I was at the top of the stairs, blind, broken. I called after her as she walked away. Do you know what she did?" "No," Evelyn's mind screamed. "No, please." She laughed. The word hit like a physical blow. I heard her laugh as she walked away from me. Not a bitter laugh, not angry, but light, relieved, happy. Evelyn's vision blurred with tears. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the bandage. "She was happy to be rid of me, Eleanor. Happy to finally be free of the burden of being my wife." His voice cracked. I heard her footsteps fade, and that laugh, it echoed through the halls. She was glad. After everything we'd been, she was glad to leave me. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face, falling onto his bandaged hand. Alistair felt the wetness. "Eleanor, are you crying?" She whispered, voice breaking. "I'm sorry, Your Grace. That's a terrible thing to believe." "Believe? I heard it with my own ears. But what if?" She stopped herself, barely holding together. "What if you heard wrong? What if that sound wasn't what you thought?" Alistair pulled his hand away sharply. "I may be blind, Eleanor, but I'm not deaf. I know what I heard. She destroyed everything. I loved her more than life itself, and she chose power over me 3 years earlier." Evelyn packed her trunk with shaking hands, tears streaming down her face. Everything she owned that mattered fit in one case. The rest, the gowns, the jewels, the life belonged to the Duchess of Thornton, and she was no longer her. She descended the grand staircase, each step agony. At the top stood Alistair, his blind eyes facing her direction, but seeing nothing. "Don't bother saying goodbye," he called down. "Just go." She looked up at him, this man she loved more than breathing, now a stranger twisted by pain and paranoia. She wanted to scream, to sob, to fall to her knees and beg him to listen, just for one moment, but she knew he wouldn't. So she made a choice. She would not let him remember her as broken, would not give him the satisfaction of hearing her shatter. She forced her mouth into a smile he couldn't see, tried to say, "Goodbye, Alistair," clearly, strongly. But what emerged was a sound that would haunt them both for 3 years, a choked, terrible sound, half sob, half laugh, the laugh of pure disbelief. The absurdity of it being accused of adultery, of treason, of not loving him, when she'd sacrificed everything to save him, being banished without even the chance to explain. She clapped her hand over her mouth, horrified, but it was too late. Alistair's face twisted with disgust. "Get out." She turned and fled, that terrible choking laugh-sob echoing in the marble hallway. At the door, she paused, whispered too quietly for him to hear, "I love you. I'll always love you." And that sound? That was my heart breaking. Not joy, then she was gone. "Present." Eleanor finished bandaging his hand in silence, her tears falling unchecked. "I've never told anyone that," Alistair said, lost in his memories. "About the laugh. Why tell me?" "Because you're the first person who's cared for me without pity, without judgment. You see me as a man, not a duke, broken, but still whole, somehow." Eleanor whispered through her tears, "You are whole, Your Grace. Broken things can still be whole." She stood to leave, legs unsteady. At the door, she paused. "Your Grace? Yes? What if she still loved you? What if everything you believed was wrong?" The silence stretched long. "Then I'm a monster," he said finally. "And monsters don't deserve forgiveness." Eleanor closed the door softly behind her. In the hallway, she collapsed against the wall, silent sobs shaking her body. "He thought I was happy. All this time, he's believed I was glad to leave him. How do I tell him? How do I explain that the worst day of my life, he heard as my liberation?" She pressed her fist against her mouth, stifling the sounds of grief. Inside his chamber, Alistair sat in the darkness. Eleanor's question haunted him. What if you heard wrong? For the first time in 3 years, a seed of doubt took root in his mind. What if I was wrong about everything? The thought terrified him more than blindness ever had. Chapter 4. Unexpected tenderness. Something had shifted between them since that terrible conversation about Evelyn's laugh. Alistair had grown more thoughtful, quieter. He no longer filled their walks with bitter commentary or caustic observations. Instead, he listened more to the bird song Eleanor described, to the rustle of leaves, to the world she painted for him with her whispered words. Eleanor, for her part, moved through the house as if walking on glass, every gesture calculated, every word measured. One slip, one moment of familiar intimacy, and he might recognize her. Yet despite their careful distance, the tenderness between them grew like ivy on old stone, slow, persistent, impossible to stop. Alistair began to notice details. The way Eleanor hummed softly while arranging his medications, a melody he couldn't quite place, but that settled something restless in his chest. The scent of lavender that followed her, faint but constant, oddly comforting in ways he didn't understand. The efficiency of her movements through the house. She never hesitated at doorways, never stumbled over furniture placement. She knew this house too well for a stranger. Her hands, when they guided his, were smooth but strong. Not the roughened hands of someone who'd spent years in service. Educated hands, a lady's hands. "Eleanor," he said one afternoon during their garden walk, "you said you lost someone you cared for. Were you married?" A long pause. He heard her breath catch, in a manner of speaking. "What does that mean?" "I was bound to someone, by law and by love, but circumstances separated us." "Did he die?" "In a way." Her whisper was barely audible. "The man I loved died. The man who remained. He became someone else." Alistair heard the pain beneath her words, pain that mirrored his own. "I'm sorry." "So am I, Your Grace." Every day. They walked in silence after that. But Alistair found his hand had somehow found her arm, and neither of them pulled away. "You wear lavender," he said another day, the observation surprising even himself. "Does it bother you?" "No, it's familiar, somehow." comforting. Eleanor's heart raced beneath her nurse's uniform. It was the same perfume she'd always worn, French lavender from a small shop in London. She'd stopped using it after being banished, unable to bear the memories it carried. But months ago, working at St. Mary's Hospital, she'd passed that shop and found herself inside, ordering a bottle as if reclaiming a piece of herself she'd thought lost forever. "My Mo," she caught herself. "Someone I knew long ago wore lavender. I suppose I adopted it in memory. Tell me about her." Careful, she warned herself. But the desire to speak truth, even obliquely, was overwhelming. She was complicated, strong but gentle, practical but romantic. She believed in second chances. Sounds admirable. She was a fool. The bitterness in Eleanor's voice surprised them both. She loved someone who didn't trust her, and that destroyed them both. Alistair was quiet for a long moment. Perhaps the trust was broken before the love ended. Perhaps the trust should have been stronger than fear. He had no answer to that. The storm came a week later, rolling in at night with the violence of early autumn. Rain lashed the windows. Thunder shook the house to its foundations. Wind screamed through the eaves like the voices of the damned. In his bed, Alistair began to breathe rapidly. The sounds, rain, wind, the crack of thunder transported him back. To another storm, another night, the terror of the carriage tilting, the horses screaming, the moment of impact that had stolen his sight and shattered his world. His chest tightened. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The darkness pressed in, suffocating, absolute. He found himself on the floor, crawling toward the wall, disoriented and gasping. The door burst open. "Your Grace, Alistair." Eleanor's voice cut through the panic. She was beside him in an instant, dropping to her knees on the cold floor. "I'm here. You're safe. Breathe with me." She took his hand. He was clutching at nothing, at air, and placed it firmly on her chest, just below her collarbone. "Feel my breathing. Match it. Slow, steady, in and out." He focused on the rise and fall beneath his palm, the solid warmth of her, the reality of her presence anchoring him to the present. Slowly, infinitely slowly, the panic subsided. He clung to her hand like a lifeline, his forehead pressed against her shoulder, trembling. Eleanor guided him back to bed with gentle hands. He wouldn't release her. "Don't go, please." "I won't. I'm right here." She sat on the edge of his bed, still holding his hand. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside this room, there was only the sound of their breathing and the warmth of shared presence. After a while, she began to hum a lullaby, soft and low. Alistair's breathing steadied. "That song, my mother sang it to me," Eleanor whispered. It was a lie. The song had been taught to her by her own mother, yes, but she'd sung it to Alistair in their early marriage, when he couldn't sleep, when parliamentary concerns kept him awake into the small hours. "Someone sang that to me once," he murmured, half asleep now. "A lifetime ago." Eleanor's throat tightened. She kept humming, kept holding his hand, kept vigil through the storm. "Eleanor, yes? You remind me of someone. Someone I lost." She couldn't answer. The next morning, Alistair was embarrassed. "I apologize for last night," he said stiffly as she brought his breakfast. "I don't usually." "You have nothing to apologize for, Your Grace. We all have scars." A pause. Then, "Eleanor, I must confess something." "What is it?" "I find myself waiting for your footsteps each morning, listening for your voice." He sounded almost bewildered. "Is that foolish, to find comfort in my nurse's presence?" Eleanor's voice was thick with emotion. "No, Your Grace. It's human. I think," he hesitated, as if testing the weight of words he'd never expected to say. "I think you've become more than my nurse. You've become a friend. Perhaps the only friend I have left," Eleanor whispered. "Then I'm honored, Your Grace." And heartbroken, she didn't add. Because friendship built on deception is no friendship at all. That afternoon, Dr. Bennett came for a routine examination. After checking Alistair's eyes, the same examination he'd performed monthly for 3 years, he pulled Eleanor aside in the hallway. "There's been a development." His voice was carefully neutral. "A colleague in London has perfected a surgery." Eleanor's heart stopped. "For blindness caused by optic nerve damage. It's experimental, but promising." "How promising?" Her whisper was barely a breath. "If successful, His Grace could regain his sight within weeks." The hallway tilted. Eleanor gripped the wall for support. "Does he know?" "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first." Bennett's eyes were kind but unflinching. "Because Eleanor, or should I say, Evelyn, you need to prepare." She didn't deny it. Couldn't. "He'll hate me, perhaps. Or perhaps he'll finally see the truth. in every sense. When will you tell him? Tomorrow. Bennett touched her shoulder gently. Which means you have until then to decide. Stay and face him, or disappear again. That night, Eleanor sat in her small room, pen in hand, composing a letter by candlelight. Your Grace, by the time you read this, I will be gone. You were right, I am a coward. But I cannot bear to see the hatred in your eyes when you learn who I really am. Thank you for allowing me to care for you these past weeks. It has been both my greatest joy and my deepest pain. Forgive me. E. She sealed it with shaking hands, placed it on the dresser, packed her bag with the same efficient movements she'd used 3 years ago. So little had changed. She was still running, still unable to face the man who'd destroyed her. She opened the door to leave. Dr. Bennett stood in the hallway. Going somewhere, Your Grace? Don't call me that. Her voice broke. I'm not a duchess anymore. You never stopped being one. Not in law, and certainly not in his heart. His heart? He despises me. He despises the woman he thinks betrayed him. But Eleanor, the quiet nurse who's cared for him, he's falling in love with her. They're the same person. Exactly. Bennett's smile was sad. Which means somewhere, deep down, Alistair Thornton still loves his wife. He just doesn't know it yet. He deserves to know the truth, Evelyn, and you deserve to hear his answer. What if his answer is hatred? Then at least you'll know. But what if it's not? He paused. What if learning the truth sets you both free? Evelyn stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then she closed the door, unpacked her bag with trembling hands, tore the letter in half, then quarters, then into pieces too small to read. She whispered to her reflection in the small mirror, "One more day. I'll stay one more day." But she knew it was more than that. She was choosing to stay for the revelation. For the moment when Alistair would see her, truly see her, and she would finally know if the man she'd loved still existed beneath the bitterness and pain. In his room, Alistair lay awake, listening to the house settle into silence. He thought of Eleanor's touch during the storm, the solid warmth of her, the gentle strength that had pulled him back from the edge of panic. He thought of Evelyn's laugh echoing down the hallway, the sound that had haunted him for 3 years. He thought of how they both haunted him in different ways, one with absence, one with presence, one with the past, one with the possibility of a future, unaware that they were the same woman, unaware that tomorrow his world would change forever. Outside his window, the stars wheeled through the darkness, marking time toward revelation. Chapter 5. Confessions in Darkness. Eleanor's hands shook as she carried the breakfast tray down the hallway. Today, Dr. Bennett would tell him about the surgery. Today, everything would change. The careful equilibrium they'd built over 6 weeks, the tender routine, the growing trust, the dangerous warmth between them would shatter like fine crystal dropped on marble. She pushed open the door to Alistair's chambers. "Good morning, Your Grace." "Eleanor." His voice was warm, almost tender, a tone she hadn't heard in years. "I slept well, thanks to you." She set the tray down with unsteady hands. "The storm didn't return, no, but I dreamed of it, of the accident." He paused, his blind eyes turned toward where she stood. "And I dreamed of you, pulling me from the wreckage." Her hands stilled on the teacup. "That's a kind dream, Your Grace. It felt real, as if you've always been there, saving me. If only you knew," she thought desperately. "I tried to save you from yourself, and failed." Mid-morning, Dr. Bennett arrived. Eleanor stood in the corner of the study, trying to make herself invisible as Bennett settled into the chair across from Alistair. "Alistair, I have news, significant news, my impending death." Alistair's dark humor had softened in recent weeks, but old habits died hard. "Your impending sight." Silence. The word hung in the air like a bell's toll. Eleanor watched. Alistair's face watched. Hope and disbelief wore across his features. "There's a surgery," Bennett continued. "Experimental, but with a high success rate. It could restore your vision." Alistair went very still. "Are you serious?" "Completely. The procedure repairs optic nerve damage using a new technique developed in Vienna. My colleague in London has performed it successfully 12 times. "When?" Alistair's voice was barely above a whisper. "I can arrange it for next week, if you're willing." "To see again," Alistair's voice cracked. "Samuel, I'd give anything." In the corner, Eleanor felt the floor drop out from under her. 1 week. She had 1 week before he would see her face and know the truth. 1 week before everything ended. That afternoon, Alistair was transformed, excited, nervous, almost boyish in his enthusiasm. Eleanor had never seen him like this, not in the 6 weeks she'd cared for him, and rarely even in their marriage. Hope looked strange on him after so much bitterness. Eleanor, I could see again. Imagine it. She tried to match his excitement, tried to whisper appropriate responses as he paced the study. I could read my own correspondence, ride my own horse, manage my estate properly. He laughed. Actually laughed. I could see your face. Eleanor froze. Your Grace? I've imagined it, you know. Your face. He turned toward her voice. I think you must be beautiful. Not in appearance, though I'm sure you are, but in spirit. I hear it in your voice. The kindness, the strength. When I can see, the first thing I want to look upon is you, the woman who saved me. Eleanor whispered, barely audible. I don't know if I can bear that, Your Grace. Why not? Because sometimes seeing changes everything. He smiled, misunderstanding. Yes, it will change everything, for the better. Their routine continued that evening, the garden walk they'd established over weeks of careful habit. But today, Alistair was distracted, excited, already living in a future he couldn't yet see. Eleanor, when I can see, I want to show you things. Take you to London, to the theatre. His enthusiasm was painfully innocent. Have you ever been to the opera? Yes, she thought. You took me for our first anniversary. We saw Mozart. You held my hand through the entire performance. Your Grace, she whispered instead. I'm your nurse. When you're healed, you won't need me anymore. He stopped walking, turned to face her, though he couldn't see her. Is that what you think? That I only value you for your medical skills? What else would I be to you? A friend, a companion, perhaps. He trailed off, hesitant. Perhaps what? Perhaps more. If you'd have me. Eleanor's heart cracked down the middle. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. That night, Alistair called for her. He'd never done that before, never summoned her to his chambers after dark. Eleanor came quickly, concerned. Your Grace? Are you unwell? Sit with me, please. She sat carefully on the edge of his bed, wary. A long silence stretched between them. Outside, an owl called. Inside, only their breathing filled the darkness. Then, I need to tell you something. Before the surgery, before everything changes, Eleanor's pulse thundered in her ears. I was married once. I told you that. But I didn't tell you. His voice caught. I didn't tell you I loved her. Desperately, completely. She was my world. Eleanor's breath came in short, painful gasps, and I destroyed it. I destroyed her. How? The whisper escaped before she could stop it. I didn't trust her. I had evidence, or so I thought, of her betrayal. His hands clenched on the coverlet. But I never asked her to explain. I never gave her a chance to defend herself. I was blind even before the accident, Eleanor. Blind to her goodness, her loyalty. I heard what I expected to hear, saw what I expected to see, and when she left, when I heard her laugh, his voice broke completely. I convinced myself she was glad, that I meant nothing to her. But what if I was wrong? What if that laugh was something else? Grief? Despair? Eleanor whispered through her tears. What if she never betrayed you at all? The evidence. Evidence can be misread, misunderstood. Her voice gained strength. What if her meetings with Lord Egerton were innocent? What if the letters were for something other than what you thought? Alistair was silent for a long moment. I've thought about that. In these past weeks, I've thought about it constantly. Being blind has taught me something. He turned his face toward her. I relied too much on what I could see, and not enough on what I felt. And what I felt, in my heart, was that Evelyn loved me. But I let my eyes, my assumptions override that. If I could see her again, tell her I'm sorry. His voice was raw with grief. But it's too late. She's gone. And I don't deserve her forgiveness anyway. He reached out, found Eleanor's hand, gripped it like a lifeline. But I believe I've been given a second chance. With you. I know it's madness. I know I'm your patient. You're my nurse. But Eleanor, I believe I'm falling in love with you. The world tilted. Eleanor's vision blurred with tears. Your Grace, you don't know what you're saying. I do. You've shown me what I was too blind to see before. That love is in the small acts, the quiet presence, the unwavering devotion. That love is patient, kind, selfless. Then came the words that shattered her completely. If only I had met you first, Eleanor. If only I had known someone like you existed. I wasted my life on a woman who never truly cared for me, who saw me as a title, not a man. But you see me, the broken, blind man I am now. And you stay. If only I hadn't married her. If only I'd waited, been patient. Then perhaps I would have found you, and none of this pain would have happened. Eleanor was trembling, tears streaming silently down her face. He wishes he'd met me instead of me. He's wishing our marriage never happened. How do I tell him we're the same person? That the woman he's wishing away is sitting right here? Your Grace, She couldn't speak past the grief choking her. Alistair, misinterpreting her silence. I've upset you. Forgive me. I shouldn't have been so forward. It's just, you've given me hope. After 3 years of darkness, you've shown me light. And when I regain my sight, I want to see a future. Our future. If you'll have me, she whispered, voice broken. You deserve to be loved, Your Grace. You always did. Then say you'll stay. After the surgery, say you won't leave me. She couldn't promise that, couldn't lie. I'll stay until you can see clearly, until you see everything. Then that's enough, for now. He lifted her hand to his lips, kissed it gently, a gesture of such tenderness that it felt like a blade between her ribs. Thank you, Eleanor, for everything. Eleanor returned to her room and collapsed. Silent sobs racked her body, muffled against her pillow so the household wouldn't hear. He loves me. He loves me without knowing it's me. He wishes he'd never married me. While falling in love with me, how can this possibly end well? She looked at her reflection in the small mirror, tear-stained, red-eyed, destroyed. What have I done? She whispered to herself. What have I done? The woman in the mirror had no answers. That night, both lay awake in their separate chambers. Alistair, dreaming of sight restored, of Eleanor's face finally revealed, of a new beginning free from the ghosts of his past. He imagined a future with this gentle nurse who'd saved him, who'd shown him what love could be when built on honesty and trust. He didn't know he was imagining a future with his own wife, Evelyn, dreading the revelation that would come in 1 week's time, knowing that when Alistair saw her face, all the tenderness between them would curdle into betrayal. He would see her deception, not her devotion, her lies, not her love. The surgery was scheduled, the clock was ticking, and the truth, like the dawn, could not be held back much longer. In 7 days, Alistair would see, and Evelyn would lose him all over again. Chapter 6. The Restoration. The household buzzed with activity. Servants packed trunks, arranged travel documents, prepared the London townhouse for occupation. Alistair moved through the preparations with nervous energy, asking questions, making demands, unable to sit still. Eleanor moved through it all like a ghost, quietly terrified. In 1 week, he would see. In 1 week, everything would end. They travelled by carriage to London, Dr. Bennet accompanying them. Alistair had insisted Eleanor ride with him in the main carriage, not with the servants. You're not staff, he'd said firmly. You're Eleanor, as if that explained everything, as if she were her own category, beyond classification. During the journey, he reached for her hand, found it, held it. Are you frightened? She whispered. Terrified. What if it doesn't work? What if I'm trapped in darkness forever? And if it does work, then I'll finally see the world again. And you. His grip tightened. Eleanor, if the surgery fails, would you stay with me? Even then? Her heart broke. Yes, Your Grace, I'll stay. But when you can see, when you know who I am, will you want me to? They arrived at Alistair's London townhouse as evening fell. Eleanor stood in the entrance hall and felt time collapse. She hadn't been here since before the banishment, since the days when she was the Duchess of Thornton, mistress of this house, hostess of glittering parties in these very rooms. Every corner held memories. The drawing room where they'd celebrated their first Christmas as husband and wife. The ballroom where he'd first told her he loved her, whispering it against her ear as they waltzed. The study where they'd spent countless evenings planning the estate's future together, her head on his shoulder as they reviewed ledgers by firelight. She walked through like a ghost haunting her own past. Eleanor? Alistair called from the stairs. Are you there? Yes, Your Grace. I'm here. I've always been here, she didn't say. Even when you thought I was gone. The night before the surgery, Alistair couldn't sleep. Near midnight, he sent for Eleanor. She came in her nightgown and robe, her hair loose down her back improper, but there was no one to see, no one to judge. I'm sorry to wake you. I wasn't sleeping either. Sit with me. She sat by his bed, as had become their habit over these long weeks. Alistair's hands twisted in the coverlet. What if I regain my sight and I'm disappointed? In what? In everything. In the world I've been missing. He hesitated. In how things look versus how I've imagined them. Eleanor understood the deeper fear. And if you see me, and I'm not what you hoped? Impossible. I know your soul, Eleanor. However you look, you'll be beautiful to me. But you know my face, she thought. You've seen it 1,000 times. Will you still think it beautiful when you know it's mine? Eleanor, reckless with emotion and fear, whispered, "Your Grace, if I told you something about myself, something shocking, would you listen?" He turned toward her voice immediately. "Of course, you can tell me anything." She opened her mouth to confess. "I'm Evelyn. I'm your wife. I've been here all along." But the words wouldn't come, locked behind her teeth like prisoners. I care for you, more than I should, more than is proper." It wasn't the confession she'd meant to make, but it was true nonetheless. Alistair reached out, his hands finding her face in the darkness. His fingers traced her features, something he'd never done before. Forehead, cheekbones, nose, lips. He was cataloguing her, memorizing her by touch, creating a map he would match to sight tomorrow. "Tomorrow I'll see this face, and I already know I'll love it." He leaned forward, hesitating. "May I?" She should say no, should pull away, should protect them both from the devastation to come. Instead, she whispered, "Yes." He kissed her, tender, uncertain, achingly sweet. It was nothing like the passionate kisses of their marriage. Those had been fire and possession and need. This was fragile, new. A first kiss between two people learning each other. When he pulled back, he was smiling. "Tomorrow changes everything." Eleanor, tears streaming silently. "Yes, it does." Early morning, before they left for the hospital, Dr. Bennett found Eleanor in the small garden behind the townhouse. "You kissed him." She didn't ask how he knew. "Yes." "Evelyn, don't call me that. I don't know who I am anymore. You're the woman who's about to break that man's heart, or heal it, depending on your next choice." "What choice?" "He'll see me and know. There's no choice left. There's always a choice. You can run, or you can stay and face him. If I stay, he'll hate me. If you run, he'll hate himself." Bennett's voice was gentle but firm. "For falling in love with you twice and losing you twice. That's cruel either way. Love often is. But at least if you stay, there's a chance for truth, for real healing." Eleanor looked at the roses in the small garden. She'd tended them yesterday evening, unable to help herself. Her roses, blooming again from her secret care. "I'll stay. But Samuel, when he sees me, don't let him hurt himself. He'll be angry, possibly violent." "He won't hurt you. I'm not worried about me. I'm worried he'll hurt himself. The guilt, the shame, it might break him. Then you'll have to be strong enough for both of you." The hospital was sterile, smelling of carbolic and ether. Alistair sat in the surgical chair, nervous, gripping Eleanor's hand so tightly it hurt. The surgeon, a precise man with spectacles and steady hands, explained the procedure. Alistair would be sedated. The surgery would take approximately 3 hours. Afterward, bandages must remain on for 3 days to allow proper healing. Then the reveal. 3 days, Alistair repeated. "I can wait 3 more days." Eleanor wasn't sure she could. She sat outside the operating theatre for 3 hours. Dr. Bennett sat beside her, a quiet presence. "Tell me honestly, Samuel, what are the odds this works?" 70%, maybe higher. "And if it doesn't, then he stays blind. And you can continue as you are, caring for him as Eleanor. Is that what you'd recommend?" "No. Truth is always better than comfortable lies, even when truth is painful." 3 hours passed like 3 years, like 3 lifetimes. Finally, the surgeon emerged. "The procedure went well. We'll know more when we remove the bandages." Alistair woke groggy, bandaged, his voice slurred from the drugs. "Eleanor, I'm here." She took his hand. "Did it work? Can I see?" "You're bandaged, Your Grace. We won't know for 3 days." 3 days? I have to wait 3 more days? Doctor's orders. Your eyes need time to heal. He squeezed her hand. "Stay with me. All 3 days. I'm not going anywhere." "Not yet, but soon. You may want me to." They returned to the townhouse. Alistair was bedridden, bandaged, frustrated at the waiting. Eleanor tended to him constantly, bringing meals, reading to him, sitting with him through the long hours. He talked endlessly about the future, about his plans, about them. "When I can see Eleanor, we'll marry. If you'll have me." Her hands stilled on the book she was reading. "I know I'm presumptuous. I'm older than you, scarred by my past. But, Your Grace, please. I'll court you properly. Ask your family's permission. We'll do it right this time." This time, she thought. If only he knew. Each declaration of love was a knife in her heart. Day 3 arrived. Night fell. Tomorrow, the bandages would come off. Tomorrow, he would see. Eleanor sat beside his bed, watching him sleep. She memorized this moment, the peace on his face, the trust in the way his hand rested near hers, as if even in sleep he reached for her. Tomorrow, that trust would shatter, she whispered into the darkness. I'm sorry, Alistair, for everything, for the lies, for the pain I'm about to cause you, but most of all, I'm sorry that loving you has been both my greatest joy and my deepest sorrow. She leaned down, kissed his forehead gently. Tomorrow, you'll see me, and I'll lose you all over again. Dawn broke cold and clear. Dr. Bennett arrived with his colleague, the surgeon. Their footsteps on the stairs seemed impossibly loud. Alistair woke, excited, nervous. Today's the day, Eleanor. Yes, Your Grace, today's the day. She stood in the corner, hands clasped so tightly her nails drew blood, heart racing so fast she thought she might faint. The surgeon approached with his instruments. Are you ready, Your Grace? More than ready. The surgeon began to unwrap the bandages, layer by layer, white gauze falling away like shed skin. The moment approached like an executioner's blade, and Eleanor prepared for her world to end. Chapter 7. The Revelation. The room had been prepared with meticulous care. Curtains drawn to filter the harsh morning light into something gentle. A single lamp glowing in the corner. The air smelled of carbolic and something medicinal Eleanor couldn't name. Dr. Bennett stood to one side. The surgeon, precise, clinical, positioned his instruments on a small table. A nurse assistant hovered near the door. And Eleanor pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing, watching the man she loved sit in that chair with his hands gripping the armrests like a drowning man clutching driftwood. Remember, Your Grace, the surgeon said, his voice professionally calm. Your vision will be blurry at first. It will take time to adjust. I understand. Alistair's voice trembled with barely contained emotion. Just, please. I've waited 3 years for this. The surgeon nodded and reached for the first layer of bandages. Eleanor watched, memorizing every second. This is the last moment he loves me. The last moment before everything ends. White gauze wrapped around Alistair's head like a shroud. The surgeon's hands moved with practiced efficiency, unwinding, revealing. Alistair's hands twitched, wanting to help but forced to remain still. How do you feel? The surgeon asked. Terrified, hopeful, alive. Good, that's normal. The first layer fell away, then another. Eleanor's vision blurred with tears she couldn't shed. Not yet. Not here. More gauze, this layer stained slightly yellow from the healing ointments. Alistair suddenly gasped. I can feel light, I think. Or am I imagining it? You're not imagining it. Your optic nerves are responding. Alistair laughed, actually laughed, a sound of pure, unbridled joy. I can feel light. Eleanor, do you hear that? I hear, Your Grace. Her voice was steady, though her heart was shattering into pieces. I hear. Soon. I'll see you. Finally, I'll see you. Yes, she thought, and wish you hadn't. The surgeon paused, the final layer of bandages in his hands. This is it. Are you ready? More than ready. Keep your eyes closed until I tell you to open them. The light will be intense at first. Alistair nodded, his entire body taut with anticipation. The final bandage was removed. Alistair's face was revealed pale, scarred slightly from the accident, thinner than it had been 3 years ago. His eyes were closed, dark lashes stark against his cheeks. Eleanor stared at that beloved face and felt time stop. Now, the surgeon said softly, slowly, open your eyes. Alistair's eyelids fluttered. He squinted against even the dim, filtered light, his face contorted with the effort of focusing, of making sense of shapes and colors and movement after 3 years of absolute darkness. I can see shapes, movement. Excellent. Your vision will clear in a few moments. Don't strain. Alistair blinked. Again and again. The world slowly coming into focus like a painting emerging from fog. He looked at Dr. Bennett first, the nearest figure, familiar voice made visible. Samuel, wonder filled his voice. You have a beard. I didn't know you had a beard. Dr. Bennett laughed, relief evident. For 15 years, Alistair. Alistair's gaze swept the room, the furniture, the window, the lamp casting its golden glow. It's all so vivid. I'd forgotten color. I'd forgotten how beautiful the world is. Then his expression changed, focused, searching. Where's Eleanor? Eleanor stepped forward, into his line of sight. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee before he could see her face, recognize her, hate her. But she'd promised Samuel she'd stay, promised herself she'd face this. So she stepped forward. Alistair turned toward the movement. His vision was still adjusting. She was a blur of dark hair and pale skin, a feminine shape in a nurse's uniform. Eleanor, I'm here, Your Grace. His eyes focused, sharpened, the blur resolving into features, into a face. He saw her, and the world stopped. Alistair's expression shifted, joy to confusion, confusion to recognition, recognition to shock. His eyes widened, his mouth opened. A sound escaped him, half gasp, half denial. He jerked backward in his chair so violently he nearly fell. "No, no, you can't be here." His voice rose, panic flooding every syllable. "What are you doing here? Is this some kind of trick?" Dr. Bennett stepped forward quickly. "Alistair, calm yourself." "Calm myself? She's here. Evelyn is here." The name echoed through the room like a gunshot. "Have you come to mock me? To see me at my lowest? Is this Edgerton's doing?" He looked around wildly, as if expecting his rival to emerge from the shadows. "Did he send you? Is he here? Watching this? Did you plan this? All of it? Some elaborate revenge?" Eleanor stood frozen, tears streaming silently down her face. The surgeon, utterly confused, tried to intervene. "Your Grace, this is Nurse Eleanor." "That's not Eleanor," Alistair's voice cracked. "That's my wife. That's Evelyn." He tried to stand, stumbled. Dr. Bennett caught him, steadied him. "Sit down. You'll hurt yourself." "Don't touch me." Alistair wrenched away. "How long has she been here? How long?" "Since the beginning," Dr. Bennett said quietly. "She's been your nurse this whole time." Alistair stared at Evelyn, betrayal and confusion warring across his face, a face she could see now, could read, after months of only imagining his expressions. "You?" His voice dropped to something raw and wounded. "You've been caring for me? All this time? Was it amusing, listening to me complain about you to you, hearing me wish I'd never married you while you bandaged my wounds?" His voice cracked completely. "How could you be so cruel?" Evelyn's voice, when it came, was no longer a whisper but clear and strong. "Cruel? You think I was being cruel? I came back because I couldn't bear the thought of you suffering alone. I came back to say goodbye, to care for you one last time before I let you go forever." Her voice rose with 3 years of suppressed pain. "And yes, I listened to you complain about me, about my betrayal, my infidelity, my joy at leaving you. Do you know what that was like, hearing how wrong you were about everything?" Alistair stared at her, breathing hard. The panic was fading, replaced by something else, something more complex. Confusion, grief, dawning horror. Evelyn took one step forward. He flinched. She stopped, hurt flashing across her face so visibly that Alistair's breath caught. Then, slowly, carefully, as one might approach a wounded animal, she took another step. Alistair's hands gripped the chair arms, white-knuckled, but he didn't retreat. Another step. She was directly in front of him now. Slowly, she reached out. Her fingertips touched his face, the same gentle touch he'd known for months. The touch that had guided him through darkness. The touch he'd come to love. The touch that had comforted him, healed him, saved him. Alistair's breath caught. "It's you." The words were barely a whisper. "The touch, the lavender, the way you knew exactly where everything was in my house. The song you hummed. Evelyn used to sing that." His eyes widened with terrible understanding. "Because you are Evelyn." Evelyn's hand remained on his face, steady despite her tears. "It's me, Alistair. It's always been me. Your wicked wife, your quiet nurse. Both. The same woman. The woman you banished. The woman you fell in love with again. I'm both, Alistair. I've always been both." Alistair's face crumpled as the truth crashed over him in waves. "All this time, every conversation, every moment. When I said I wished I'd met you first," his voice broke completely. "When I complained about the woman who left me. When I told you about hearing her laugh." He looked up at her, pure agony in his newly seeing eyes. "You? The wife I banished? That was you, all of it. And you stayed. You stayed. After what I did, after what I said, you stayed and cared for me. Why?" His voice was hoarse, broken. "Why would you do this? I told you. I came to say goodbye." "No." He shook his head violently. "Not at first. Why did you stay? After everything I said to you?" Evelyn's tears flowed freely now, unashamed. "Because I never stopped loving you. Even when you cast me out. Even when you believed the worst of me. Even when you wished you'd never married me. I loved you then. I love you now. I've loved you through every moment of pain. The things I said," Alistair's voice was barely audible, "the complaints about the laugh. Evelyn, I'm so sorry." "Don't." Her voice turned sharp as a blade. "Don't apologize yet. You need to hear the truth first. About Lord Edgerton, about the letters, about everything. Evelyn's voice steadied, years of suppressed anger and grief giving it strength. Lord Egerton was never my lover. He was my partner in saving your fortune. Your investments were failing. You were too proud to see it, too stubborn to ask for help. So I went to him, your rival, because he had the connections in shipping that we needed. Those letters, they were about business deals, moving your assets, protecting your wealth, the arrangement we discussed. It was me selling my dowry properties to cover your debts. That's what he meant when he said you could never know, because you would have stopped me. You would have refused, out of pride, and lost everything. Alistair had gone deathly pale. No, that can't be. It's true. Her voice rang through the room. I sacrificed my inheritance to save yours, and you repaid me by accusing me of adultery. And the laugh. That terrible laugh you heard when I left. Her voice softened, became almost tender with grief. I wasn't happy, Alistair. I was broken. I tried to say goodbye with dignity. I smiled so you wouldn't hear me crying. But what came out was this horrible choking sound. Half sob, half laugh. The laugh of someone whose world is ending. The laugh of absurdity and despair. I was laughing at the cosmic joke of it all, that I could love you so much and have you believe I loved you so little. And you heard that as joy, as relief, as me being glad to leave you. She was sobbing now. I've carried that knowledge for 3 years, that you thought the worst moment of my life was my happiest. Alistair slid from the chair to his knees. What have I done? What have I done, Evelyn? I destroyed us. I destroyed you. Over a misunderstanding, over pride, over my own cursed assumptions. He was weeping openly, this proud duke on his knees. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't deserve another chance. I'm a monster. I cast out the woman who saved me, who loved me, who sacrificed everything. Evelyn knelt before him, taking his face in both hands. She forced him to look at her, to truly see her with his newly restored sight. You broke my heart, Alistair. You cast me out without ever asking for my side, without trusting me. You believed the worst of me when I'd never given you reason to doubt. I came here to say goodbye, to let go of the love I carried for a man who didn't believe in me. But instead, something unexpected happened. Her voice softened. I fell in love with who you've become. The blind man who learned humility, the patient who learned to listen, the man who fell in love with a whisper and a touch instead of a face and a title. The question isn't whether you deserve forgiveness. The question is, can you love me, truly, knowing I'm both women? The wife you banished and the nurse you cherished. Can you love all of me? Alistair stared at her. This woman who was everything and nothing like he remembered. Same face, but different, stronger, sadder, more beautiful for the pain she'd endured. Same eyes, but they saw him now with a clarity he'd never allowed before. I don't know if I can answer that, he said with brutal honesty. I'm looking at you and seeing two people, the woman I wronged and the woman I love. I don't know how to reconcile them. I don't know if I deserve to try. Evelyn nodded, releasing his face. Then don't. Not yet. Take time. See clearly. Not just with your eyes, but with your heart. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, you know where to find me. She stood, smoothed her dress with shaking hands. Dr. Bennett will continue your care. You're healing well. You don't need me anymore. Evelyn, wait. No, Alistair. I've waited for 3 years. Now it's your turn. Wait until you can see clearly. All of it. Not just me, but yourself. Wait until you know whether you're falling in love with me or with the idea of redemption. She moved toward the door. Alistair, desperate. Where will you go? Back to nursing. Back to helping people who need me. What if I need you? She turned, a sad smile on her face. Then you'll have to ask. Properly this time. With trust. With faith. With belief. Not as a duke commanding his servant, but as a man asking the woman he loves to give him another chance. Can you do that? Alistair, still on his knees, couldn't answer. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Alistair remained on the floor. Dr. Bennett helped him up, guided him to the chair. I've ruined everything, Samuel. Again. Not yet. You have your sight now, Alistair. Use it. Use it to see what she sacrificed, what she endured, what she still feels. And then decide if you're brave enough to fight for her the way she fought for you. Alistair moved to the window, looked out at the London street below. He saw Evelyn's figure disappearing into the crowd, swallowed by the city. He could see clearly now. But had he learned to see truly? That remained to be seen. Chapter 8. Redemption and Renewal. Alistair spent weeks in London, alone with his thoughts and his newly restored sight. The world was beautiful, more beautiful than he remembered. Color had depth he'd forgotten. Light had texture. Even shadows held their own kind of grace. But none of it brought him joy. In his study, the same study where he'd banished Evelyn 3 years ago, he finally opened the letters she'd sent from exile. Letters he'd returned unopened, marked refused, in his own hand. There were 17 of them. He read them all in one sitting, and each one was a dagger to his heart. Dearest Alistair, I know you will not read this, but I must write it anyway. The truth must exist somewhere, even if only on paper. Lord Egerton was helping me save your investments. I sold my dowry properties. I did it for love. Please believe me. E. My darling, I dreamed last night that you called for me, and I came running. But when I reached you, you couldn't see me. Perhaps that's fitting. You never truly saw me, did you? But I saw you. I still see you. E. Alistair, I'm working at St. Mary's Hospital now. Caring for others helps me bear the pain of not being able to care for you. Does that make me foolish? Probably. But love has always made fools of us both. E. By the 17th letter, Alistair was weeping. I will not write again. I release you from any obligation you might feel toward me. I release myself from the hope that you might one day understand. We loved each other once, and that will have to be enough. Goodbye, my heart. E. He pressed the letters to his chest and felt something break inside him that had been cracked since the day he sent her away. The next day, Alistair visited Lord Egerton. He found his former rival at his club, reading the Times over breakfast. Egerton looked up as Alistair approached, surprise flickering across his features. Thornton, I heard about your sight. Congratulations. May I sit? Egerton gestured to the empty chair. By all means. Alistair sat, gathered his courage and said, I need you to tell me the truth. About Evelyn. About the business arrangements. All of it. Egerton studied him for a long moment, then set down his paper. Your wife saved you, he said bluntly. She came to me and it must have cost her dearly, given our rivalry, and proposed a partnership to salvage your failing investments. She had the vision. I had the shipping connections. Together, we moved your assets, restructured your holdings, and kept your estate from bankruptcy. She sold her own properties that were hers by right of her dowry to cover immediate debts. She asked for nothing in return except my discretion. Alistair's hands clenched on the table. Why didn't you tell me? She made me swear not to. She said your pride would be wounded if you knew, that you'd refuse help rather than accept it from me. Egerton's expression hardened. She was protecting you from yourself, and you threw her away. If you were any other man, Thornton, I'd call you out for such dishonor. But she asked me not to. Even then, even after you banished her, she protected you from the consequences of your own foolishness. Alistair stood, extended his hand. Thank you for helping her, for telling me the truth. Egerton shook his hand, but his grip was firm, almost punishing. Don't thank me. Earn her forgiveness. If you can. Alistair hired investigators. Within a week, they'd traced Evelyn's movements over the past 3 years. The reports came back, and each one made Alistair's chest tighten with mingled pride and shame. She'd worked at St. Mary's Hospital in London for 18 months, then at a charity ward in the East End, then at a workhouse infirmary, tending to the poorest of the poor. She'd used her skills she'd hidden during their marriage, downplayed to avoid seeming too educated for a woman to help the sick, the dying, the forgotten, the settlement he'd been legally required to provide upon banishment. It sat untouched, in an account at Coutts Bank, £1,700, gathering interest, never spent. She'd rather work herself to exhaustion than touch his money. One of the investigators included a note. Your Grace, the lady is highly respected at every institution where she's served. They call her the Angel of the Wards. She works twice as hard as any other nurse and accepts half the pay. Alistair stared at that note for hours. One night, standing in his study, Alistair picked up the miniature portrait of Evelyn he'd kept all these years. He could see it now, really see it. The artist had captured her smile, the real one, not the society smile, and the warmth in her eyes. I knew this face, he whispered to the portrait. I thought I knew this woman, but I never really saw her, not until she was gone. He made a decision. Alistair began writing letters to business partners, to members of Parliament, to society matrons who'd whispered about Evelyn's disgrace, to anyone who'd heard the rumours he'd spread in his anger and pain. Dear Lord Ashworth, I write to correct a grave injustice. 3 years ago, I accused my wife of betrayal. I was wrong. She was innocent of every charge I levelled against her. The fault was mine in pride, in assumption, in failure to trust. I hope you will join me in restoring her good name. Thornton. He sent dozens of such letters. Then, one afternoon, he walked into White's, the gentlemen's club where London's elite gathered, and asked for Lord Edgerton. The room fell silent as Alistair approached his former rival's table. Edgerton. A word? They stood in the centre of the room, every eye upon them. I owe you an apology, Alistair said, his voice carrying. And my thanks. You helped my wife when I would not. You acted with honour when I acted with none. Gasps rippled through the club. The Duke of Thornton apologising publicly to Lord Edgerton. I was wrong about many things. About you. About her. Most of all about myself. I hope to spend the rest of my life making amends. Edgerton inclined his head. See that you do, Thornton. By evening, the story had spread through London like wildfire. Alistair restored all of Evelyn's seized property to her name. He donated to every charity she supported, hospitals, orphanages, workhouses in her name. He made sure London society knew that the Duchess of Thornton had been wronged and that her husband was the villain of the story. He visited St. Mary's Hospital where she'd once worked, stood in the corridor, watching from a distance as she tended to patients. He saw her kneel beside a child's bed, smoothing the blanket, whispering comfort. Saw her hold an old woman's hand as the woman wept. Saw her close the eyes of a man who'd just died, her lips moving in what might have been a prayer. And he saw, truly saw, the woman he'd married, not a title, not a duchess, but a woman of extraordinary compassion and strength, a woman he didn't deserve but couldn't stop loving. Every day, Alistair wrote to Evelyn, letters of apology, of explanation, of love. Dearest Evelyn, I saw you today at the hospital. You didn't see me. You were caring for a child with fever, and your face held such tenderness. I remembered that face from our wedding day. I'm sorry I forgot it. My darling, I spoke with the bank today. The settlement I gave you, you never touched it. Why? Did you hate me so much you couldn't bear my money? Or did you love me still, and couldn't bear to use what I'd given in cruelty? Evelyn, I'm learning something. Being broken doesn't mean being worthless. You taught me that, though I was too blind to learn it the first time. He wrote dozens of letters. He sent none of them. He wasn't ready, wasn't worthy. First, he had to become the man who deserved her. Alistair began volunteering at a hospital for wounded soldiers. Men who'd lost limbs, lost sight, lost pieces of themselves in service to the crown. He used his own experience of blindness, of helplessness, of having to relearn how to exist in the world to help them. How do you bear it? One soldier asked him. The man had lost both legs at Waterloo. Being less than you were? By learning that less and different aren't the same thing, Alistair said. I was blind for 3 years. I thought my life was over, but I learned more about myself in darkness than I ever had in light. You understand, Your Grace, another veteran said one day. You know what it's like to be broken. Yes, Alistair said quietly, and I'm learning that being broken doesn't mean being worthless. It just means being human. 6 months after Evelyn left him kneeling in that London townhouse, spring arrived. The season began. Balls, parties, the endless social machinery of London's elite grinding back to life. Alistair decided to host the annual Thornton Ball, a tradition he hadn't observed since before his accident. But this time, he made changes. He invited everyone. Nobility, yes, but also merchants who'd supported him, soldiers from the hospital, common folk who'd shown him kindness. He wanted people, not just titles, and he ensured that Evelyn received an invitation. Evelyn stood in her small apartment, staring at the heavy cream envelope. The Thornton seal, embossed in silver. Her name, Her Grace, the Duchess of Thornton, written in elegant script. She'd heard the rumours, of course. London was a small world, for all its size. Alistair's public apologies, his charity work, his transformation. Is it real? She wondered aloud. Or is it guilt? Or worse, pity? She almost threw the invitation away. But something made her pause. Some small, stubborn ember of hope she'd thought she'd extinguished months ago. She decided to attend, to see for herself if the man she'd loved still existed beneath the Duke's proud facade. The night of the ball, Evelyn arrived wearing a simple but elegant gown of deep blue. No jewels, no ostentation, just herself. She was nervous, unsure why she'd come. The Thornton townhouse blazed with light. Music spilled from the ballroom. London's elite mingled in their finest clothes, laughing, gossiping, dancing. Evelyn entered through the main doors, not the servants' entrance she'd used as Nurse Eleanor. The grand staircase rose before her, and at its base, a butler announced guests. Lady Pemberton and daughters, Lord and Lady Ashworth. Then Evelyn saw him. Alistair stood at the base of the stairs, greeting guests with a grace she remembered from their early marriage. He looked well, healthy. His sight had been restored, yes, but something else had changed. Something in the way he held himself less rigid, more human. He looked up, as if sensing her gaze. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom. Time stopped. Alistair immediately walked away from the guests he'd been greeting, strode across the ballroom toward her with such purpose that the crowd parted before him. Every eye turned to watch. The room fell silent. Evelyn stood frozen at the entrance, her heart hammering. Alistair reached her. The butler, flustered, began. "Nurse, Eleanor, Ash." Alistair raised his hand, stopping him, his voice pitched to carry through the silent ballroom. "No, that is not her name." He turned to Evelyn, and in that moment, the whole room, the crowd, the whispers, the watching eyes disappeared. There were only the two of them. He stepped aside, gestured to the grand staircase with profound reverence. "I cannot enter my own ball before you are properly announced." He bowed deeply, the kind of bow reserved for royalty, and declared in a voice that rang through the ballroom, "Please announce the Duchess of Thornton first. She is my equal. She has always been my superior." Gasps rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. The Duchess? But wasn't she? He banished her years ago. Is he acknowledging her again? The butler stood frozen, uncertain. Alistair's voice firmed. "Announce my wife, the Duchess of Thornton, the woman who saved my fortune, my estate, and my life, while I repaid her with cruelty." The butler recovered his composure. "Her Grace, the Duchess of Thornton." The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Evelyn, tears streaming down her face, whispered, "Alistair, you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." His voice was fierce, certain. "I cast you out in private rage. I will restore you in public honor. But more than that, Evelyn, I do this because it's true. You are my equal, in courage, in strength, in every way that matters. And I'm hoping, praying that you'll give me the chance to prove I finally understand that." He offered his arm. "May I have the honor of entering with you?" Evelyn looked at his outstretched arm, at his face no longer the proud, untouchable Duke, but a man humbled and hoping. She placed her hand on his arm. "Yes, Alistair, you may." They descended the grand staircase together, every eye in the ballroom on them, every whisper stilled. He publicly honored her. After all she endured. Perhaps the Duke has finally learned something about love. At the bottom of the stairs, the orchestra began to play. A waltz, the same waltz they danced to at their wedding. Alistair turned to Evelyn. "Would you dance with me? I'm not sure I remember how. Then we'll learn together, as we should have done from the start." They took the floor. The crowd watched as the Duke of Thornton and his restored Duchess waltzed slowly, carefully, as if learning each other's steps for the first time. Alistair held her as if she might break, or as if he might wake and find this was a dream. "Why now, Alistair? Why this grand gesture?" "Because I needed to show you. Show everyone, but mostly show myself, that I'm not the man I was, that I'm trying to become the man you deserve. I've spent 6 months learning to see clearly, not just with my eyes, but with my heart. And what I see is this. You loved me when I was unlovable. You saved my investments. You saved my life. You loved me when I was blind, in every way that mattered." After the dance, they slipped away to the terrace. London glittered below them, 1,000 lights reflecting off the Thames. Stars wheeled overhead in the clear spring night. "That was quite the statement," Evelyn said softly. "It was the truth. And I'm done hiding from truth." A pause. Then, "Evelyn, I know I have no right to ask this, no right to hope. But I'm not asking you to come back. I'm not asking you to resume being the Duchess you were. I'm asking if we could start again, not as Duke and Duchess resuming old roles, but as two people who might learn to trust each other, slowly, carefully, with honesty this time." Evelyn looked at him, this man she'd loved, hated, mourned, and loved again. "If we do this, Alistair, there are conditions. Anything. First, we start slowly. Courtship, letters, conversations, no assumptions. Agreed. Second, you must trust me, even when things look bad, even when you're afraid. Trust first, question later." His voice cracked. "I promise. I swear on everything I am." Third, we're honest. Always, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Yes, complete honesty. She was quiet for a long moment. "And fourth, you must forgive yourself. Alistair looked shocked. What? You're carrying so much guilt, Alistair. I can see it in your eyes. Feel it in how you hold yourself. And yes, you hurt me. Deeply. But I've forgiven you. Not because you've earned it, but because I choose to. For my sake, not yours. But if you can't forgive yourself, you'll spend our whole life trying to make up for the past instead of building the future. So forgive yourself. Not to forget, but to move forward. Tears streamed down his face. I don't know if I can. Then learn. We'll learn together. Evelyn's voice steadied. I forgave you months ago, Alistair. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting or returning to what was. Then let's build something new. His voice was fierce with determination. Something better. Something where I see you clearly with these eyes and with my heart. Something where we communicate, trust, and choose each other every day. Evelyn smiled a real smile, the first in years. Yes, let's build something new. Starting now. Starting tonight. Alistair reached for her hand, the same hand that had guided him through darkness. May I court you, Evelyn Thornton? You may, Alistair Thornton. But be warned, I'm not the naive girl who married a duke. I'm a woman who survived heartbreak, poverty, and exile. I'm stronger now, harder to impress. He laughed, genuine, joyful. Good. I don't want easy. I want real. Then real is what you'll get. 1 year later, spring returned to Thornton Estate. The rose garden was magnificent. Evelyn and Alistair had restored it together over the autumn and winter. Red roses bloomed everywhere, vibrant and alive, perfuming the air with their sweetness. They walked together, hand in hand, no longer Duke and Duchess in title only, but partners in every sense. Do you ever think about it? Evelyn asked. Those months when you didn't know who I was? Every day. Alistair smiled. It's strange, isn't it? I fell in love with you twice. First with Evelyn the Duchess, though I didn't truly see you then. Then with Eleanor the nurse, when I finally learned to listen, to feel, to trust. And now with Evelyn again. But this time, I see all of you. Evelyn stopped, touched a red rose. Do you ever miss the darkness? The simplicity of it? He considered. Never, because now I can see you, truly see you, and that's worth everything. Even the pain of learning how wrong I was, even the shame of what I did, because it brought me here, to this moment, with you. He touched her face, the same face he'd traced in darkness, the same face he'd feared to see, the same face he now cherished above all things. This face, the face I feared when I first saw it again, the face I loved without knowing. The face I know now I never truly saw before, even when I had my sight. I see your strength, your forgiveness, your courage. I see the woman who saved me in every way a person can be saved. Evelyn's eyes shone with tears, happy tears, this time, and I see the man who learned to see with his heart, who learned that love requires faith, that trust is a choice, that redemption is possible. I won't say I'll never fail you again, Alistair said seriously. I'm human. I'll make mistakes, but I promise I'll always listen, always trust, always choose to believe in you. Even when I'm afraid, even when things look wrong, I'll choose faith over fear, and I promise to tell you the truth, always, even when it's hard. No more secrets, no more sacrificing myself in silence. We face everything together, as equals. As equals, Alistair echoed. They continued walking, discussing their plans. The hospital they were founding together in London, a place where the poor could receive care regardless of ability to pay. The estate programs to help struggling tenants with repairs and education. The family they hoped to build, though Evelyn had cautioned that at 32, she might not conceive easily. Strange, Evelyn mused. If you'd never lost your sight, we might never have found each other. Not truly. The accident took my vision, but it gave me clarity. And you, Alistair said softly, returned in disguise, to say goodbye, but ended up saving me again. Perhaps we needed to lose everything to find what mattered. Perhaps. Or perhaps we just needed to learn to see clearly. They reached the fountain, the one Evelyn had secretly cleaned during her time as his nurse. Water sparkled in the sunlight, dancing and alive. I can see every drop, Alistair marveled. Every ripple, the way light dances on water. For 3 years, I saw nothing. Now, I see everything. But the most beautiful sight? He turned to her. You, here, choosing me again, choosing us. Evelyn leaned into him. Always us, from now on. They stood together in the garden they'd restored, surrounded by roses they'd planted, beside the fountain they'd cleaned together, the blind duke who learned to see, and the quiet nurse who taught him how. Both found, both healed, both home. And so, Dear listeners, the blind Duke learned to see not just with his eyes, but with his heart. Evelyn, the quiet nurse who never stopped loving him, taught him the greatest lesson of all, that true love requires trust, patience, and the courage to see clearly. If this story of second chances and hard-won redemption touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Lyra's Romance Stories. Your support helps us bring you more tales of love that heals, forgives, and transforms. Have you ever had to learn to see someone or yourself with new eyes? Have you experienced the pain of misunderstanding or the beauty of reconciliation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your stories inspire the tales I tell. And if you know someone who needs to hear a story about forgiveness, about how love can survive even the deepest wounds, please share this video with them. Sometimes, the stories we need most are the ones that remind us redemption is always possible. Thank you for spending this time with me in the world of Alistair and Evelyn. Until our next story, remember, the greatest sight is not what we see with our eyes, but what we see with our hearts. This is Lyra, reminding you that every ending is a new beginning.
From the team of Lyra's Romance Stories,
we wish you a Happy New Year.
Happy New Year! Extra! 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 Get your latest news right here.
Happy New Year.